I have a stack of documents in front of me today that are, well, they're difficult to look at.
Mm,
And I don't mean that in the usual sense of, oh, this is dense academic reading.
right.
I mean, the content itself is heavy. It resists the kind of easy narrative we usually try to find on this show.
It really does.
Usually we look for a silver lining or a hero or at least a clear resolution. Today, the material just doesn't offer that.
No, it doesn't.
We are looking at two very specific, very rigorous investigations that document the internal mechanics of the Russian state system.
And that's the key word, isn't it? Mechanics.
Exact. We are talking about the machinery of violence.
That's right. And it is crucial that we establish a cold, analytical atmosphere for this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We need to detach ourselves slightly to understand what we're looking at.
Detach. How so?
Well, if we approach this with pure emotion, we are going to miss the structural reality. We need to look at this the way a structural engineer looks at a collapsed building.
Oh, I see what you mean.
We aren't looking for the why in a philosophical sense. We're looking for the structural flaws, the load-bearing walls, and the specific mechanics that cause the collapse. We are dealing with documented extortion, extrajudicial execution, and systematic torture.
The structural frame we're using today is Putin's Russia. And I want to be very, very precise with our language here because words matter so much with this.
Absolutely.
When we say Putin's Russia in this deep dive, we are not talking about Russian culture. We aren't talking about Dostoevsky or Tchaikovsky. We're talking about a specific state apparatus, a power structure that has been built over decades and, well, how it functions on the ground today.
Exactly. It's a distinction that is so often lost in the noise of social media or cable news. This is an analysis of a system, not a condemnation of a population. The core thesis we are exploring, based strictly on these investigations, is that violence in this system is not an accident. It's not an excess committed by a few bad apples or rogue commanders.
Right.
It is a reproducible structural feature.
The concept we kept coming back to while reading through these investigations is this idea of one machine, different victims.
Yeah.
It seems like the system has a specific operating logic that it applies regardless of who is in front of it. It operates outward against Ukrainian civilians, which, we see in the headlines.
We do.
But what really shocked me in these documents is how it operates inward, with equal brutality against its own Russian soldiers.
That is the key insight. The logic of the machine remains constant. Only the target changes.
And to really understand this, we've had to be really strict with ourselves.
Very strict. We've restricted ourselves to two primary pieces of evidence. We aren't pulling from hundreds of random Twitter threads or unverified Telegram.
We're drilling down.
We're drilling down into two comprehensive investigations. The first is a video testimony from a Russian soldier, Junior Sergeant Denis Kolesnikov of Regiment 1435, which appeared on Denis Kazansky's channel.
And the second is the Kyiv Independent documentary titled Inside Russia's System of Torture.
And that's it. Those are our anchors.
These are our anchors. If it's not in these documents, we aren't discussing it. The mission for this deep dive is to look past the maps and the strategy and understand the human reality. How does this system assert control? How does it use fear? How does it use financial extortion?
We're going to strip away the euphemisms and look at the mechanics. Let's start with the internal view, the view from inside the Russian army.
Okay. Let's unpack this first investigation. We are looking at testimony concerning Regiment 1435. The central figure here is Junior Sergeant Denis Kolesnikov. Now, before we get into the specifics of what he says, we have to talk about the source. Context is everything here.
It is.
This isn't a prisoner of war reading a script written by his captors in some clean room. This is something else entirely.
No. And that is absolutely critical for the credibility of this evidence. This testimony was recorded by Vladimir Romanov.
And Romanov is...
Now, for those who don't follow the deep weeds of the Russian information space, Romanov is a vonkor, a war correspondent.
A war correspondent.
But he's not an independent journalist in the Western sense. Not at all. He is pro-war. He supports the invasion. He is deeply embedded in the Russian information ecosystem.
So wait a minute. If he supports the war, why on earth is he releasing a video that makes the Russian command look like an organized crime family? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But it speaks to the level of internal dysfunction. Romanov published this not to help Ukraine, but because the internal rot had become so undeniable, so catastrophic to their own operations, that he felt compelled to document it.
He's blowing the whistle on his own side.
He's essentially whistleblowing from the right. He's saying, look at what our own commanders are doing to our men. Denis Kolesnikov then analyzed this footage. So what we're looking at is internal Russian documentation leaked by a believer in the system, which makes the content even more damning.
Okay, let's get into the content.
Right.
We have Junior Sergeant Kolesnikov. He's in Regiment 1435. What is the picture he paints of life in this unit? Because from the outside, we imagine an army. We imagine hierarchy, discipline, logistics, but that's not what he describes.
Not at all. He describes a financial trap. It sounds less like a military unit and more like a cartel or a hostage situation.
Hostage situation.
We know that men in Russia are signing these contracts for large state payments. You see the billboards everywhere, huge signing bonuses, high monthly salaries. For someone from a poor region, this is a life-changing amount of money.
It's the promise of financial stability for their family.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Join up, get 1,000,000 rubles, serve your country. That's the pitch.
That is the pitch. But Kolesnikov's testimony reveals the bait and switch. Once these men are inside the unit, specifically Regiment 1435, the logic completely changes.
How does it change?
The commanders do not view these soldiers as tactical assets to be used for military victory. They view them as revenue streams.
Revenue stream.
They view them as biological ATMs.
Let's slow down on that because that is a massive claim. You are saying the commanders are looking at their own troops and seeing cash. How does that work in practice?
It works through what the testimony calls the tariff.
The tariff.
Yes, the testimony is very specific about the numbers. Kolesnikov states clearly that there is a price tag on survival. He mentions a sum between 1 and 3 million rubles.
1 to 3 million rubles. For context, that's basically the entire signing bonus, isn't it?
Often, yes. Or it's the accumulated salary of several months. It is a significant sum.
And what does that money buy you?
And let's be very clear about what you're buying with this money. You are not buying extra body armor. You are not buying better rations or a warmer tent.
Okay.
You are buying the right not to go to the zero line.
The zero line. That's the front, the direct contact.
It is the direct contact line, the meat grinder. You are paying protection money to your own commander to avoid being sent to your death.
So it's a subscription service for your own life.
That's a perfect way to put it. It is a subscription service for your life.
That is extortion, pure and simple. It's pay us the bonus the state just gave you, or we will send you to die.
Precisely. The commander knows the soldier has received the state payment. It's a closed loop. He knows the money is sitting in that account. So he creates a situation, a life or death situation, where the soldier has to hand it over.
And Kolesnikov actually names names.
He does. He names the specific commanders involved. He identifies them by call signs. Ulukbek, Bizon, and Semyon.
Ulukbek, Bizon, Semyon. These aren't vague, shadowy figures in his telling. He's pointing the finger directly.
No, they are the managers of this extortion scheme. They're the ones setting the prices. And this brings us to the term that appears in the investigation, a term that really defines the logic of this machine.
What's the term?
Zeroing out.
Obnuleni?
Obnuleni. In a normal context, that sounds bureaucratic, like resetting a clock or clearing a balance sheet.
Exactly. It has a clean, sterile sound to it.
But in this context, what does zeroing out actually mean?
It is a euphemism for extrajudicial execution. Murder.
Murder.
Zeroing out means killing your own soldier. And the testimony describes the triggers for this. It's not about cowardice in the face of the enemy. It isn't about desertion in the traditional sense. It's about money.
So what are the triggers?
If a soldier refuses to pay the tariff, or, and this is perhaps even more terrifying, if they simply run out of money and can no longer pay the subscription fee for their own life,
They get zeroed out.
they are zeroed out. I want to pause here because this is hard to process. You have a soldier, he's signed up, he's trained, presumably, he's armed, and his own commander kills him because his bank account is empty.
That is what the testimony states. The soldier ceases to be profitable, so he is liquidated. He's no longer an asset. He becomes a liability.
And there's another trigger Kolesnikov mentions, complaining.
Yes. If you attempt to rock the boat, if you try to contact the prosecutor's office or the FSB to report the extortion, you become a liability.
And then you're a liability that needs to be.
You are then zeroed out.
But how do they hide it? I mean, you can't just shoot 50 guys, and we'll get to the numbers in a second. You can't just shoot people in your own base and not have questions asked. There has to be paperwork. There has to be a cause of death.
Kolesnikov describes the mechanics of the cover-up in forensic detail. And this is where that engineer mindset helps us, because otherwise it's just too gruesome to really parse.
Okay. What are the mechanics?
He says they don't just shoot them, they transport the bodies. And then they use grenades.
Grenades. On their own dead soldiers.
He is very specific. He says they place grenades under the bodies to simulate combat damage. They blow the bodies up so that the injuries look like they were caused by artillery or FPV drones.
So they're staging a combat death.
Exactly. It provides a clean paperwork trail. The commanders can say, oh, brave Ivan died defending the motherland. An FPV drone got him.
But in reality...
In reality, he was murdered because he wouldn't transfer his bonus to Ulukbek. It solves two problems for them. It gets rid of the witness, and it explains the body.
The scale of this is what's truly staggering. I mean, one murder is a tragedy, a crime. But Kolesnikov isn't talking about one or two guys who got on the wrong side of a bad captain.
He claims 50 men.
50.
50.
Yeah.
He says half of his squad was zeroed out by their own commanders.
Half the squad.
Half the squad. Think about the implications of that statistic for a moment.
Yeah.
In Regiment 1435, according to this testimony, you are statistically just as likely, if not more likely, to be killed by your commanding officer for money than by the opposing army.
It's a liquidation of your own personnel.
That's exactly what it is.
It completely dismantles the idea of brotherhood or comrades in arms. It makes the unit sound more like a predator-prey relationship.
It is predatory. The commanders are the predators and the soldiers are the prey. The state gives the prey a chunk of money, and the predator is there to harvest it.
But surely someone tries to stop it. You said, Kolesnikov mentions that they tried to use the legal channels, they tried to do the right thing, they called the prosecutors.
This is a crucial point regarding the structure of the state. In a functioning state, even a flawed one, there are checks and balances.
Yeah.
You have a grievance chain. You go to the military prosecutor. You go to the security services, the FSB.
And he says they did that.
Kolesnikov says they did that. They tried to make the calls, but the complaints never left the regiment. Or if they did, they were intercepted.
He talks about connections.
Yes. The commanders, Ulukbek and the others, have connections. The testimony suggests a vertical integration of corruption. It implies that the oversight bodies, the people supposed to be policing this, are either paid off or they simply don't care. This is the concept of the blocked exit.
The blocked exit. Explain that.
You're in the unit. You are being extorted. You know you are going to be killed. And if you try to call for help, the person you are calling is likely friends with the person holding the gun to your head.
So the system protects itself.
Or, as Kolesnikov notes, the complaint gets flagged, sent back down to the unit commander, and then the complainer is zeroed out for being a snitch. Filing a complaint is essentially signing your own death warrant.
So it's a sealed system. A vacuum.
It is a vacuum where the only law is the will of the commander.
Oh.
Psychology.
Yeah.
We have to look at what this does to a human being. The Russian soldier in this regiment is reduced to material. He's an asset to be stripped. When the money is extracted, the human husk is disposed of. It is a completely transactional view of human life.
And that transactional nature, that reduction of a human being to an object or a resource, that is the perfect bridge to the second investigation.
It is.
Because I keep thinking, if they treat their own people this way, people who wear the same uniform, speak the same language, sing the same anthem, it is terrifying to imagine what that logic looks like when it is turned outward.
Exactly. We have to pivot now. We are moving from the inward violence against the soldier to the outward violence against the civilian. The source here is the Kyiv Independent documentary, Inside Russia's System of Torture.
This investigation documents the treatment of Ukrainian civilians in Russian captivity. And again, I want to stress, we are talking about civilians. The people interviewed in this documentary are teachers, priests, local officials.
Right.
These aren't combatants captured on the battlefield with a rifle in their hands. These are people taken from their homes.
That distinction is vital. Under international law, civilians are afforded specific protections. But the investigation reveals that inside this system, those protections do not exist. What is so striking about the Kyiv Independent's findings is the uniformity.
The uniformity? You mean the methods are the same everywhere?
Yes. Survivors from different regions, Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and from different time periods, they all describe the exact same methods.
That's significant.
It's incredibly significant. If this were just rogue soldiers blowing off steam or a chaotic fog of war situation, the violence would be random. It would look different in every basement. But it doesn't. It looks the same.
So what does that imply?
That implies training. It implies a system. It implies a shared culture of torture that is standardized across the military and security services.
A culture of torture. Let's walk through what a detainee experiences. The investigation describes the arrival. They call it the reception.
They call it the corridor. It's a standard procedure. When detainees arrive at a detention center, they are blindfolded, often handcuffed. They are forced to run a gauntlet.
Oh, cops.
Guards line up on both sides of the hallway.
And they just beat them as they run through.
With batons, with hands, with feet. It is immediate, overwhelming physical violence. And we have to ask, what is the utility of this? They aren't asking questions in the corridor. They aren't interrogating yet.
So it's not for information. It's something else.
No. The purpose is disorientation.
Yeah.
It is dominance. It is designed to break the will of the person immediately, to shock them into a state of total submission before the interrogation even begins.
It's a signal.
It's signal to the prisoner. You have no rights here. Your body belongs to us.
And once the interrogation does begin, the methods described are, well, they're medieval in their pain, but modern in their technology. We have to talk about the call. The investigation spends a lot of time on this.
This is one of the most pervasive methods documented. It involves a device called a TAPIC.
A TAPIC. What is that exactly? Is it a purpose-built torture device?
Technically, no, and that's part of the horror of it. It's a military field telephone.
A telephone.
It's old-school, reliable technology used for communication between trenches. It has a crank handle to generate a signal. But in these detention centers, it is not used for communication. It is repurposed.
Explain how it works. I mean, how they use it.
The TAPIC generates a strong electric current when you crank the handle up to 80 or 100 volts, depending on the model and how fast you crank. The torturers attach wires to the victim.
Where?
They attach them to fingers, to earlobes, or, as documented in several cases, to genitalia. Then they crank the handle.
And they have a name for this. They don't say, we are going to electrocute you.
No. They use the euphemism. They say, let's make a call to Putin, or call Zelensky, or the most cynical one, call the energy minister.
It's a joke to them.
It turns the torture into a joke, a grotesque joke. But the physiological effect is devastating. Survivors describe muscle ruptures. They describe their bodies arching uncontrollably, teeth shattering, loss of consciousness. It is total incapacitation.
Call the energy minister, because it's electricity.
Exactly. It's a pun made while destroying a human being's nervous system.
There is another method mentioned that I hadn't heard of before, but the investigation traces it back historically. The salty fish. This sounded almost innocuous at first, until you understand the context.
Yes, this is a method of torment that sits right on the line between physical and psychological torture. They feed the prisoners incredibly salty fish, often raw or pickled herring. They force them to eat it, but then they deny them water.
So you are burning with thirst. For days.
Desperate thirst. The salt accelerates dehydration, and they keep you in a cell, often overcrowded, with no water for days. The investigation notes that this isn't new. This was a method used in the gulags.
It's been brought back.
It's a specific historical method of torment that has been resurrected. It creates a state of physical agony and panic. You are dying of thirst, and the taste of the salt is constantly in your mouth.
And the conditions themselves, overcrowding. We hear that word overcrowding in prison reports all the time. We think, okay, it's cramped, but this is different.
Overcrowding here is a weapon. It's not just poor management. It's a tool. Standing for days. The investigation documents cells where people could not sit or lie down because there were so many bodies packed in. They had to stand.
Days on end.
When you stand for days on end, your legs swell. Your circulation fails. People hallucinate. It breaks the mind as much as the body.
We also have to address the sexual violence. The report is very clear on this, and it's something we can't look away from.
It is difficult to discuss, but we must. The documentation shows rape of both men and women. It shows the use of electricity on genitalia, and it shows the threat of sexual violence used against family members.
That's the psychological component again.
Tell us what we want to know, or we will bring your wife here. It is the weaponization of the most intimate violation possible. It destroys the person's sense of self-worth, their dignity, everything.
What strikes me most in the testimony from the survivors, and I want to linger on this for a minute, is the attitude of the perpetrators. You might expect, I don't know, a grim, business-like detachment. I have a job to do, I hate it, but I have to get this info. But that's not what they describe.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They describe laughter. They describe the soldiers and officers enjoying it. The Russian word used is kaif, getting a kick out of it.
Getting a kick out of it.
Survivors say the torturers would laugh while inflicting pain. They would joke with each other.
It's a sport.
It becomes a sport. Dominance becomes recreational. The investigation points out that often The silence of a victim provoked more violence.
That's completely counterintuitive.
You might think, logically, if I stay quiet, they will stop because I have nothing to say. But the goal wasn't always information. The goal was the reaction.
The scream.
They wanted the screams. They wanted the begging. When a victim refused to break, the torturer felt denied their win, so they escalated until they got the reaction they wanted.
That is terrifying. It connects back to that idea of impunity. If you can do anything to another human being and you find it funny and no one stops you, that creates a feedback loop.
It creates a feedback loop of sadism. When there are no boundaries, the darkest impulses of the human psyche are unleashed. And this brings us to the synthesis.
Right.
We have looked at Regiment 1435, and we have looked at the detention centers in occupied Ukraine. Now we need to step back and see the one machine.
It's the same logic. It really is. Whether it's the commander extorting his own sergeant or the guard torturing a local mayor, the tool is violence.
Violence is the primary administrative tool. That is the structural reality of Putin's Russia, as revealed in these documents. If you need money, violence. If you need submission, violence. If you need silence, violence. It is the universal solvent for any problem the system faces.
And the language. I want to talk about the language again. We talked about the call. We talked about zeroing out. Even the tariff. These are all euphemisms. Why? Why do they use them?
They are mechanisms of normalization. Think about it. Zeroing out turns murder into accounting.
It sounds clean.
It sounds bureaucratic. We zeroed him out. It doesn't sound like we blew him up with a grenade because he was broke.
Now the call.
The call turns electric shock into a prank. The tariff turns extortion into a business transaction. These words allow the perpetrators to distance themselves from the reality of their actions.
It's a linguistic buffer zone.
Exactly. They create a linguistic buffer zone where they can pretend they are not monsters, but just operators, functionaries.
And all of this happens in a legal void. We mentioned the blocked exit for the soldiers, the lack of
Absolute lawlessness. It's twofold. Internal lawlessness for the soldier. The state does not protect him because the state is the commander who is robbing him.
And for the civilian.
And international lawlessness for the civilian. The Geneva Conventions. They exist on paper in Geneva. They do not penetrate the walls of the basement in occupied Kherson.
So inside that basement.
Inside that basement, the only law is the whim of the man holding the topic.
I want to take a moment to just clarify for you, the listener, what exactly is being violated here. We hear terms like war crimes and crimes against humanity thrown around on the news. But based on these investigations, what are we actually seeing?
We are seeing clear violations of international humanitarian law. Torture is absolutely prohibited. There is no exception. War, emergency, orders from superiors, none of it justifies torture.
And the killings.
Willful killing of protected persons like civilians, or in the case of the soldiers, their own personnel. That's a war crime. Unlawful confinement, that's a war crime.
And it becomes a crime against humanity when
you look at the systematic nature, the fact that this is happening everywhere, in the same way, that moves us into the realm of crimes against humanity. That is defined as a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population.
But the reality check is, the law isn't stopping it.
No. The law is currently decorative. The investigation showed that the mechanisms of justice have been completely displaced by the mechanisms of force.
This brings us to a difficult part of the conversation. We need to address the Western observer, you the listener, or maybe your friends, your colleagues. There is often a defense mechanism we see in the West. We look at Russia and we see the ballet, we see the literature, we see Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Chekhov, and we think, a culture that produced this high art cannot be this brutal.
We call this the cultural shield.
Yeah.
It is a powerful deflection tactic. It creates cognitive dissonance.
How so?
We want to believe that a nation with such a rich soul cannot also have such a dark heart. But we must be absolutely clear. Cultural greatness does not cancel out documented violence. A torture chamber is a torture chamber, regardless of the nation's history.
So the Bolshoi Ballet.
The fact that the Bolshoi Ballet exists does not mitigate the pain of the person hooked up to the field telephone. The two things can coexist.
It's almost like we want to believe in a better Russia so badly that we ignore the evidence in front of us.
Exactly. We confuse the past with the present. We confuse the art with the state. The state apparatus we are analyzing today, the one that zeroes out its own soldiers, is not the same entity that wrote 19th century poetry. We have to look at the reality of this machine, not the ghost of its culture.
And then there's the skeptic, the person who says, look, war is hell, bad things happen on both sides. This is just chaos. You find bad guys in every army.
That is a dangerous simplification. The both sides argument fails when you look at the systemic nature documented here.
This is not chaos.
This is not chaos. Chaos is random. What we are seeing is procedure. The tariff is a structured system with set prices. The tabik is a standard piece of equipment used for a standardized form of torture. The corridor is a standard reception procedure. This is not the fog of war. This is the logic of the machine.
So when people say both sides, they are ignoring the institutional architecture that promotes this violence.
Precisely. We aren't looking at a breakdown of discipline. We're looking at the enforcement of a specific kind of discipline, one based on terror and extortion.
And there is a warning here, isn't there, for anyone who thinks they can engage with this system using Western logic, or that it's somehow over there and doesn't affect them.
There is. The danger lies in projecting our values onto this system. We assume that if we are polite, if we are rational, if we follow the rules, we will be safe. But in a system that turns torture into procedure, those rules do not apply.
It's the illusion of safety.
The illusion of safety is fatal. To assume that judicial protection exists or that you have rights inside this system is an error.
And the logic follows. If they do this to their own soldiers, men who signed contracts to fight for them, who are supposedly on the same side, they certainly won't hesitate to do it to a tourist or a journalist or a diplomat who gets in the way.
Precisely. The system does not distinguish between enemies and romantics. If you become a variable in their equation, they will solve you using the only tool they have: violence. The machine simply processes whatever is fed into it.
So where does that leave us? We've looked at the inward violence, the outward violence, the structure of impunity. It's a bleak picture.
It is bleak, but it is necessary to see it clearly. We have to understand that this system is cannibalistic. That's the final thought I want to leave you with.
Cannibalistic.
Yes, a system that zeroes out its own defenders for cash. How sustainable is that?
It doesn't seem very sustainable at all.
If a command structure is willing to liquidate its own personnel, the very people supposed to keep the regime in power just to make a quick profit, what are the limits of that state's violence? It suggests a kind of terminal rot.
A system that eats its own.
It's a system that eats its own, and it is ultimately unstable no matter how strong it looks from the outside.
And it suggests that the violence we see in Ukraine, the invasion, the occupation, is simply a reflection of the violence that is inherent in the domestic structure of Putin's Russia. They are exporting their internal reality.
They're exporting the machine. The corridor, the tabik, the tariff. These aren't just war tactics. They are the constituent elements of the state's relationship with human beings.
We started this deep dive by saying we wanted to look past the geopolitics and understand the human reality. I think the reality is that in this system, the human element is completely erased.
The human is fuel, nothing more.
This is the reality documented by the investigations. The sources are the evidence, and the evidence demands a verdict. This is what is happening.
The rest is just noise.
Just noise. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.